My nephew spat on my birthday cake as my family laughed, and my mother told me I was no longer welcome. They thought my generosity was a given, that my support was unconditional. So I made one phone call and transferred every single bill and loan back into their names. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The little flame on the single candle flickered, casting a warm, dancing glow across the faces gathered around the dining table. My dining table, in my house, for my 38th birthday. It should have been a happy moment, a simple celebration with the people who were supposed to love me most. But as I took a deep breath, preparing to make a wish, a knot of familiar anxiety tightened in my stomach. I'd been feeling off for weeks, a persistent fatigue clinging to me like a damp coat, and a dull ache in my joints that had finally prompted a doctor's visit. The preliminary results were inconclusive but worrying, and the specialist appointment was still 2 weeks away. I'd tried to push the worry aside for just one evening. I just wanted one peaceful night. My sister, Lucy, was filming everything on her phone, a practiced, saccharine smile plastered on her face for her social media followers. "Say happy birthday to Auntie Amy," she cooed at her 9-year-old son, Leo, who was sitting directly across from me. Leo stared at the cake, a beautiful triple-layer chocolate fudge creation I'd picked up from my favorite bakery. His expression was sullen, his lower lip pushed out in a pout. He hadn't wanted to come. He wanted to stay home and play his video games, and his tantrum had made them an hour late. "Leo, honey, say something nice," my mother, Megan, urged gently from her seat beside him, though her eyes were also glued to the cake, a little too eagerly. I tried to smile, to bridge the uncomfortable silence. "It's okay. Maybe he's just saving his voice for the happy birthday song." Lucy lowered her phone slightly, her influencer smile momentarily dropping. "Oh, he's just being a kid, Amy. Don't be so serious all the time." Before I could respond, Leo leaned forward, his face contorting with a sudden, vicious energy. He pursed his lips and, with a wet, deliberate sound, spat directly onto the center of the cake. A glob of saliva landed right next to the candle, glistening under the soft light. Then he looked me dead in the eye and yelled, "You don't deserve it anyway." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. I stared at the violation on the cake, the symbol of my one small request for a pleasant evening, now tainted and ruined. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just the spit. It was the venom in his voice, the pure, unadulterated contempt in his eyes. And where had a 9-year-old learned such a phrase? "You don't deserve it." Then the silence was broken by a sound that was 1,000 times worse. A snort. It came from Lucy. She quickly covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking, but it was too late. A giggle escaped, then another. My brother-in-law, Mark, let out a nervous chuckle, and soon my own mother was smiling, a tired, indulgent smile as if Leo had just performed a slightly naughty but ultimately charming trick. "Oh, Leo," Megan said, her voice laced with amusement. "What are we going to do with you?" They were laughing, all of them. They were laughing at the spit on my cake, at the insult hurled in my face, at my stunned, silent humiliation. I felt the blood drain from my face. The room seemed to tilt, the cheerful decorations suddenly looking garish and mocking. I looked from my sister's laughing face to my mother's dismissive smile, and I felt a profound and chilling wave of loneliness wash over me. It was as if I was watching a scene from a movie, completely detached from the people who were supposed to be my family. I didn't say a word. I simply stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. The laughter faltered as all eyes turned to me. I walked over to the kitchen counter, picked up the cake, and without looking at any of them, dropped the entire thing into the trash can. The thud was satisfyingly final. "Well, that was a bit dramatic," Lucy commented, her voice dripping with condescension as she finally pocketed her phone. I still didn't speak. I couldn't. The words were trapped behind a wall of hurt so immense it felt physical. I grabbed my purse and my keys from the counter. "Where are you going?" my mother asked, her tone shifting from amusement to mild irritation. Don't ruin the evening over a little joke, Amy. A joke? He spat on my cake and she called it a joke. I finally turned to face them. My expression, I'm sure, was as empty as I felt inside. I looked at my mother, the woman who was supposed to protect me, and saw only a stranger W. Ho prioritized her grandson's appalling behavior over her daughter's dignity. I'm not feeling well, I said, my voice flat and hoarse. I think it's best if I go to bed. I walked out of the room, up the stairs, and into my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I could hear their muffled voices downstairs, a mixture of annoyance and indignation. They weren't concerned, they were inconvenienced. They stayed for another 20 minutes before I heard the front door close and their cars drive away. The silence they left behind was vast and absolute. I sat on the edge of my bed, the doctor's worrying words echoing in my mind, and realized with a sickening clarity that I was utterly and completely alone. The betrayal was worse than any diagnosis could ever be. The hours after they left were a blur of hollow quiet. I didn't cry. I felt strangely beyond tears, as if the emotional shock had cauterized the wound, leaving behind a numb, hardened scar. I changed into my pajamas, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator seemed to amplify my isolation. This was my house, the one I had worked tirelessly for, the place that was supposed to be my sanctuary. Tonight, it felt like a mausoleum. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again, a string of texts. Reluctantly, I picked it up. They were from Lucy. Text 1, seriously, Amy? You kicked us out over that? Leo is just a kid. Text 2, Mom is really upset. You embarrassed her. Text 3, you could at least answer. This is so typical of you, making everything about you. There was no apology. Not for Leo's behavior, not for their laughter, not for my humiliation. There was only blame, redirected squarely at me. I was the problem for reacting. I was the one who had ruined the evening. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it sent a cold, sharp anger cutting through the numbness. It was an anger so pure it was almost calming. I placed the phone face down and tried to sleep, but my mind was racing, replaying the scene over and over. My nephew's sneer, my sister's snort, my mother's placid smile. It was a carousel of casual cruelty. Around 11 p.m., another message came through. This one was from my mother. My heart gave a foolish little leap of hope. Maybe she had come to her senses. Maybe, away from Lucy's influence, she had realized how deeply they had hurt me. I opened the message. Mom, your sister is very hurt by your behavior tonight. You're too sensitive, Amy. It was a child's prank. If you're going to be like this, maybe it's best you don't come around anymore. It just creates drama for everyone. The words swam before my eyes. Maybe it's best you don't come around anymore. It wasn't an apology. It was an excommunication. A banishment for the crime of having feelings, for being too sensitive. All the years I had been the reliable one, the responsible one, the one they called when they needed something, all of it was erased by this single, callous message. I was being discarded because my pain was an inconvenience. I read the text again and then a third time. And with each reading, something inside me shifted. The hurt, the shock, the profound sadness, they began to recede, replaced by a crystalline, diamond-hard clarity. For years, I had been the family shock absorber, soaking up their entitlement, their irresponsibility, their casual disregard. I had paid their bills, co-signed their loans, and bylaid them out of their self-made crises, all while asking for nothing in return except a little respect. And this was my reward. I thought about the mortgage for Lucy's house, the one she could never have qualified for on her own, the one with my name right next to hers on the deed. I thought about the car loan for my mother's SUV, the monthly payments automatically deducted from my bank account. I thought about the utility bills for her house, the cell phone plan for all of them, the insurance premiums, all neatly organized in my online banking profile, all flowing seamlessly from my earnings to support their comfortable lives. They had told me not to come around anymore. Fine, I wouldn't, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten that if I didn't come around, neither did my money. A slow smile spread across my face in the darkness. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had finally, irrevocably, been pushed too far. I got out of bed, my earlier fatigue completely gone, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. I walked over to my desk and turned on my laptop. The screen cast a cool, blue light on my face. For years, my meticulous nature, my skill with numbers and spreadsheets, my profession as a senior financial analyst had been used in their service. Tonight, for the first time, I was going to use it for my own. I opened my banking portal, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The login screen appeared, a gateway to the complex financial web I had woven around my family. For a moment, I paused, my cursor hovering over the login button. This was the point of no return. Once I did this, everything would change. The illusion of our happy, supportive family would be shattered forever. Then I thought of my mother's text, "Maybe don't come around anymore." "Okay, Mom," I whispered into the silent room. "Your wish is my command." I clicked the button. The financial ties that bound me to my family hadn't been forged overnight. They were the result of a decade of slow, creeping dependency, built on a foundation of my misplaced sense of duty and their bottomless well of need. It started innocently enough. When I landed my first big job as a financial analyst right out of college, I was ecstatic. I was the first in our family to get a degree, the first to have a real career. My mother, Megan, a retired receptionist who had been widowed young, had always struggled. Lucy, my younger sister, had flitted from one passion to another, pottery, jewelry making, and now, her latest venture as a part-time yoga instructor and lifestyle influencer, which seemed to involve taking a lot of photos of expensive coffee and activewear she couldn't afford. When Lucy wanted to buy her first condo, she didn't have the credit score or the income. I was so proud of my success, so eager to help, that I co-signed the loan without a second thought. "It's just a signature, Amy," she'd said, hugging me tightly, "just to get me on my feet." But those feet never quite seemed to find solid ground. A few years later, when she and Mark wanted to upgrade to a house after Leo was born, my signature was needed again. "It's for Leo," she'd argued. "Don't you want your nephew to have a yard? How could I say no to that?" Then there was Mom. Her car broke down and she needed a reliable vehicle. My salary was more than enough to cover the monthly payments on a new SUV. "Just for a little while," she had promised, "until my pension sorts itself out." The pension never did, and the car payments became just another line item in my monthly budget. Then came her utility bills when she tearfully confessed she couldn't keep up. Then the family cell phone plan, because it was cheaper if we bundle. Each request was an emergency, a temporary crisis that somehow morphed into a permanent expectation. I became the family's silent benefactor, the reliable financial bedrock upon which they built their lives. In their minds, my money wasn't mine. It was a family resource, like a community well they could draw from whenever they were thirsty. And the more I gave, the less I was appreciated. My sacrifices became invisible. When I worked late to close a deal, it wasn't seen as me earning the money that paid their mortgage. It was seen as me being antisocial. When I skipped a vacation to build up my savings, it wasn't prudence. It was proof I was no fun. Lucy was the primary architect of this narrative. At 35, she had cultivated an air of effortless bohemian chic, all while being completely dependent on the sister she subtly mocked. She was beautiful, charming, and deeply manipulative. She framed my financial support not as a gift, but as a fair trade. I was the boring, career-obsessed one, while she was the vibrant, free-spirited one. In her worldview, it was only natural that my boring money should fund her vibrant life. She spoke often of authenticity and living your truth, but her truth was a carefully curated Instagram feed financed by my 60-hour work weeks. She treated my contributions as her due, an unspoken tax on my success. Her son, Leo, was a direct reflection of her entitlement. He saw his aunt not as a person, but as a vending machine that occasionally malfunctioned and had to be shaken. My mother, Megan, was the quiet enabler. At 62, she seemed perpetually overwhelmed. She loved us both, I believed, but she had a crippling aversion to conflict. She saw Lucy's flaws but chose to ignore them, always making excuses for her. "That's just Lucy," she'd sigh, as if her daughter's selfishness were a charming, unchangeable personality quirk. She took my money with a quiet, resigned gratitude, but she never defended me. She never stood up to Lucy or corrected Leo. She just smoothed things over, always at my expense. Her mantra was keep the peace. But the peace she kept was built on the foundations of my silence and my bank account. The incident with the cake wasn't an aberration. It was the culmination of years of this toxic dynamic. Leo's spit was just the physical manifestation of the contempt they had all shown me, in quieter ways, for a very long time. The first rays of dawn were filtering through my blinds when I finally leaned back in my chair, my eyes gritty from a sleepless night. The anger that had fueled me for hours had cooled, settling into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was done. Done being the family's emotional and financial punching bag. Done setting myself on fire to keep them warm. The turning point had come around 3 a.m., staring at the screen displaying the automatic payment schedule for my mother's car loan. It was a picture of my life in neat, digital columns. My earnings, my sacrifices, flowing out to people who felt nothing but contempt for me. My mother's text message wasn't just an insult, it was a release. She had given me permission to stop. She had, in her own cruel way, set me free. My decision was made. I wasn't just going to cut them off. That felt too passive, too emotional. I was a financial analyst. I dealt in numbers, in contracts, in consequences. I was going to perform a surgical extraction, methodically and legally severing every financial cord that connected me to them. This wouldn't be a messy fight, it would be a clean, professional transfer of liability. The key piece of leverage, the one that made this whole plan possible, was the cosigner release clause on Lucy's mortgage. I had insisted on it when she and Mark had bought their house, much to her annoyance. "Why are you being so paranoid, Amy?" she had complained. I'd brushed it off as just being my meticulous analyst brain at work. In truth, a small part of me must have known this day might come. The clause stated that after a certain number of on-time payments, I could apply to have my name removed from the loan, transferring the full responsibility to the primary borrowers, provided they could prove their own financial stability. And I knew for a fact, having seen their bank statements, that they couldn't. But the bank didn't know that yet. The initial step was simply my formal request for removal. The bank would then reassess their financial situation, a process that would inevitably lead to a very uncomfortable reality check for Lucy and Mark. My first call that morning was not to my family, but to my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright. I laid out the situation in precise, unemotional terms. I explained the mortgage clause, the car loan, the utility bills, all of it. "Is any of this legally problematic?" I asked. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Legally problematic for you?" Ms. Albright asked. "Not in the slightest. You are under no legal obligation to finance your family's lifestyle. The mortgage release is standard procedure. The car loan is in your name, but she is the registered driver. You can simply demand she refinance it in her own name or return the vehicle. As for the utilities, you just call the companies and have the accounts transferred. It's tedious, but straightforward." She paused again. "Are you sure about this, Amy? This will have significant consequences." "I am sure," I said, my voice steady. "They have made their position clear. I am simply honoring it." Armed with legal confirmation, I began my work. It felt like a day at the office, only the project was my own liberation. I started with the easy things. I logged into each utility company's website, gas, electric, water, internet, and initiated a transfer of account ownership to my mother, effective immediately. I called the phone company and had my sister and mother's lines separated from my account, leaving them to set up their own plans. Then, the bigger items. I called the bank that held my mother's car loan. I explained that I would be making no further payments and that the driver, Megan, would need to contact them to refinance the loan in her own name or the car would have to be surrendered. The customer service agent was sympathetic and outlined the steps Megan would need to take. Finally, the mortgage. I drafted a formal letter to the bank, citing the cosigner release clause and officially requesting the removal of my name and financial liability from the property. I attached the required documentation and sent it via certified mail, emailing a digital copy for good measure. By noon, it was all done. Every tie was cut, every process initiated. I sat at my desk, a strange sense of calm washing over me. I had dismantled the entire financial structure of their lives in under 4 hours. I felt no guilt. I felt no remorse. I felt only a quiet, resolute sense of justice. Now, all I had to do was wait for the dominoes to fall. The silence lasted until 4:15 p.m. It was a beautiful, deceptive quiet, the calm before a storm I knew was coming. I spent the day trying to distract myself, cleaning the house with a frantic energy, throwing out old things, creating space. It was symbolic, I suppose. I was purging my life of everything that no longer served me. I was halfway through reorganizing my closet when my phone, which had been silent all day, erupted into a cacophony of buzzing and ringing. It was Lucy. I let it go to voicemail. A second later, a string of texts came through. Lucy, Amy, my card was just declined at the grocery store. What is going on? Lucy, I tried to pay the electric bill online and it says the account is in Mom's name. Did you do this? Lucy, call me right now. I ignored the texts and continued sorting my shoes. A minute later, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. Her tone, when I answered, was not angry. It was confused, laced with a tremor of fear. Amy, honey, I just got an email from the car financing company, she said, her voice wavering. It says you've stopped the payments and I need to refinance. I don't understand. Is this a mistake? I took a deep breath, keeping my voice perfectly level and calm, as if I were explaining a financial report to a client. No, Mom, it's not a mistake. I will no longer be paying for your car. There was a stunned silence on the other end. What? Why? What's this about? Is this because of last night? Last night was a symptom, Mom, not the disease, I said coolly. You told me that it would be best if I didn't come around anymore. I'm respecting your wishes. My financial support is part of me coming around. So, I've removed it. But I can't afford that payment, she stammered, panic seeping into her voice. And Lucy called me, she said the utilities. Yes, I confirmed. The utility accounts are now in your name. You live in the house, so you are responsible for the bills. It's really quite simple. You can't do this, Amy. This is cruel, she cried. What's cruel? I countered, my voice hardening slightly, is being told I'm not welcome in my own family. What's cruel is watching my family laugh while I'm being humiliated on my birthday. I am simply giving you what you asked for, a life without my interference. I could hear Lucy's voice in the background, shrill and angry. My mother must have been at her house. Let me talk to her, Lucy shrieked. The phone was passed, and my sister's voice, tight with fury, exploded in my ear. What the hell did you do? You are trying to ruin my life. I'm not doing anything, Lucy, I replied calmly. I'm just not paying for your life anymore. There's a difference. The mortgage, Amy. Mark got a notification from the bank. You're trying to make us homeless, she screamed. I simply initiated the cosigner release we both agreed to in the contract, I said, my tone infuriatingly professional. The bank will now assess your and Mark's ability to carry the loan on your own. If your finances are in order, you have nothing to worry about. Her reaction was immediate and telling. She sputtered, lashing out with a poorly executed threat. You think you're so smart with your little clauses? I'll sue you for emotional distress. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Sue me? On what grounds? Forcing you to be a financially responsible adult. Good luck with that, Lucy. I have a very good lawyer. You're a monster, Amy. A cold, heartless monster. No, I said, my voice dropping, the calmness finally giving way to a flicker of the deep, buried hurt. I'm a woman who has finally realized her worth. You all taught me that my love and support were conditional. So, consider the conditions changed. I hung up the phone, I knew this was just the first wave. The shock was turning to anger. The desperation would come next. They had spent years treating me like an ATM, and they were shocked to discover that this particular machine could be turned off. They had no idea how much I had documented, how carefully I had planned my exit. The folder of documents I had prepared sat on my desk, a testament to a decade of their dependency. This first confrontation was just a tremor. The earthquake was yet to come. The day after the initial phone calls was a siege. My phone was a constant barrage of frantic texts and missed calls from Lucy, Megan, and even my brother-in-law, Mark. Their messages swung wildly between furious accusations, tearful pleading, and pathetic attempts at guilt-tripping. From Lucy, "Leo is crying, he doesn't understand why you're mad. You're punishing a child." From Mom, "I can't sleep, Amy. How could you do this to your own mother? After all I've done for you." From Mark, "We need to talk about this rationally. There's no need to destroy the family." They were desperate attempts to regain control, to pull me back into the old dynamic of shame and obligation. But something in me had fundamentally broken, and their words slid off me like water off glass. I didn't respond to any of them. Silence was my new weapon, and it was devastatingly effective. Meanwhile, I was not idle. The rage had subsided, but the need for self-preservation had not. My initial actions had been defensive, a reaction to being pushed too far. Now I needed to be strategic. I knew they woo. LD tried to paint me as the villain, the cold-hearted sister who had abandoned her family. I needed to build an unassailable case, not for a court of law, but for the court of my own conscience. I spent the day gathering evidence of the full, shocking extent of their dependency. I went through years of bank statements, credit card bills, and emails. With the dispassionate focus of an auditor, I created a spreadsheet. Each line was a transaction, a bailout, a quiet act of support they had long since taken for granted. Column A, date; column B, expense; column C, recipient; column D, amount. The numbers were staggering. The down payment on Lucy's house, the furniture for Leo's room, the emergency loan for Mark when he was between jobs, the vet bills for their dog, the cost of Lucy's yoga teacher certification, my mother's dental implants. The list went on, a sprawling, multi-year history of their financial irresponsibility and my silent, enabling generosity. By the time I was finished, the total was well into the six figures. It was a monument to my own folly. The most damning discovery came when I was cleaning out an old desk drawer. I found a folder of financial documents from 5 years ago, back when Lucy and Mark were buying their current house. Tucked inside was a copy of their loan application. I remembered the day clearly. We were at the bank, and Lucy had been panicking because Mark's freelance income was inconsistent. I had not only co-signed, but I had also gifted them a significant portion of the down payment, with a formal letter to the bank stating it was not a loan. But that wasn't the shocking part. As I scanned the documents, I saw that Lucy had inflated her income from her boutique job, claiming she worked full-time and earned a manager's salary. It was blatant fraud. She had lied on a federal document. I had been so focused on my own role that I had never scrutinized hers. My presence as a co-signer had likely made the bank less diligent in verifying her claims. She hadn't just used me. She had committed a crime and implicated me in the process by having me party to the application. This changed everything. This wasn't just about family drama anymore. This was about legal exposure. My clever trap of the co-signer release now had a second, sharper set of teeth. When the bank reassessed their finances, they wouldn't just find that Lucy and Mark couldn't afford the house, they would find evidence of loan application fraud. The weight of this new information settled in my stomach like a cold stone. I had to confront them, not just for my own sake, but to protect myself. That evening, they showed up at my house unannounced, all three of them. I saw them pull into the driveway from my office window. For a moment, my heart hammered against my ribs. The old instinct to hide, to avoid the conflict, flared up, but I quickly suppressed it. I had the truth on my side, and a spreadsheet. I met them at the door, blocking the entrance. "What do you want?" We need to talk, my mother said, her eyes red-rimmed and pleading. Lucy pushed past her. You are going to fix this, Amy, she hissed, her face pale with fury. You are going to call the bank and tell them it was all a mistake. No, I said calmly, I'm not. You're tearing this family apart, Megan wailed. This family, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, was built on a foundation of my money and your entitlement. It was a house of cards, and it was bound to fall eventually. I held up the folder I had prepared. I spent the day doing some accounting. Would you like to see what your lifestyle has cost me over the past 10 years? Lucy scoffed. Oh, here we go. You always held that money over our heads. I never held it over your heads. I shot back, my control finally cracking. I never mentioned it at all. I gave it freely because I loved you. But that was a mistake. My real mistake was thinking that my love would ever be enough for you to respect me. I opened the folder and pulled out the loan application. Do you remember this, Lucy? Your mortgage application? Specifically, the part where you claimed to be earning $80,000 a year from a part-time job at a boutique. The color drained from her face. Mark, standing behind her, looked utterly bewildered. What is she talking about, Luce? It's just an estimate, Lucy stammered, her eyes darting around wildly. Everyone exaggerates a little. This isn't an exaggeration, Lucy, I said, my voice like ice. It's called bank fraud, a felony. When I signed that document, I was attesting to the truth of everything in it. You didn't just lie for yourself, you implicated me in your lie. And now that I've filed for a cosigner release, the bank is going to review this entire application with a microscope. What do you think they're going to find? The spell was broken. The furious indignation vanished from Lucy's face, replaced by pure, abject terror. Mark stared at his wife, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Even my mother was silent, her tearful pleas forgotten as the gravity of the situation finally, truly landed. They hadn't just been cut off. They were in real, serious trouble, and I was the only one who held the proof. The family showdown I had envisioned didn't happen in a public setting. It happened 2 days later, in the sterile, intimidating conference room of my lawyer's office. After the revelation about the loan fraud, Lucy and Mark had descended into a spiral of panic. The angry text stopped, replaced by a single, terrified message from Mark. We need to talk, with your lawyer. I agreed. I wanted a witness. I wanted the cold, impartial presence of the law to strip away all the emotional manipulation and family history, leaving only the bare, ugly facts. I arrived first, sitting with Ms. Albright at one side of the long, polished mahogany table. I had the folder with me, the spreadsheet, the fraudulent application, all neatly arranged. I felt calm, centered. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about extrication. Lucy, Mark, and my mother entered the room looking like they were walking to their own execution. Lucy's face was puffy from crying, her usual vibrant confidence completely gone. Mark looked haggard, a decade older than he had a week ago. My mother simply looked lost, wringing her hands in her lap, avoiding my gaze. Ms. Albright began, her voice crisp and professional. Thank you for coming. My client, Amy, has agreed to this meeting to discuss the recent changes in her financial relationship with you. She has also brought some serious legal matters to my attention. She gestured toward the loan application on the table. Specifically, this document. Mark flinched as if he'd been struck. We know, he said, his voice raspy. We went to the bank yesterday. They're opening an investigation. Lucy finally broke, her voice a desperate sob. They're going to call the loan due, Amy. We'll have to pay it all back at once. We'll lose the house. We'll be ruined. I looked at my sister, the woman who had smirked as her son spat on my cake, now utterly broken. I felt a flicker of something, pity maybe, a ghost of the sisterly affection I used to have, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of years of casual cruelty. You should have thought of that before you lied, I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. Please, Amy, my mother whispered, finally looking at me. Her eyes were filled with a desperate, pleading grief. She's your sister, he's your nephew, you can't let this happen. This was it, the final, most powerful guilt trip, the appeal to the very family loyalty they had so thoroughly trampled on. For a moment, the weight of her words, the lifetime of conditioning to be the good daughter, pressed down on me. But then I looked at Ms. Albright, who gave me a subtle, encouraging nod. I thought of the lonely, humiliated woman I had been on my birthday night. I thought of the future, a future free from this crushing burden. I took a deep breath and found my strength. I can't let this happen, I repeated, my voice rising with a controlled, righteous anger. Let me tell you what I let happen. I let you treat me like a bank instead of a daughter. I let you laugh in my face while I was being disrespected in my own home. I let you believe my only purpose was to fund your lives and absorb your contempt. The only thing I won't let happen anymore is my own destruction for your comfort. I slid the spreadsheet across the table. This is what I have let happen for the last 10 years, page after page of it. Take a look. This is the price of your ingratitude. Mark picked it up, his hands trembling as he scanned the first page. His face went ashen. He showed it to Lucy, who stared at it, speechless. My mother just shook her head, refusing to look. As for the house, I continued, my voice now firm and resolute, you have two options. You can face the bank's fraud investigation, which Ms. Albright informs me could lead to criminal charges. Or, I paused, letting the weight of the moment hang in the air. Or what? Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. Or, I said, looking directly at Lucy, you sell the house. Immediately, you use the proceeds to pay back the loan in full before the bank concludes its investigation. You downsize. You learn to live within your means, your own means. Lucy stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The influencer, the woman whose life was a performance of effortless perfection, was finally face to face with the grim reality she had created. Then came the moment of truth. Mark, who had been a passive participant in his wife's entitlement for years, finally stood up. He looked at Lucy, his expression a mixture of profound disappointment and dawning resolve. She's right, Luce, he said, his voice quiet but firm. She's right, we're selling the house. That single, decisive action was the final break. It was the moment the antagonist's spell, the long-held family delusion that I would always be there to clean up their messes, was shattered forever. Lucy crumpled, burying her face in her hands, her sobs echoing in the quiet room. My mother looked at me, a flicker of understanding, of horrified recognition, finally dawning in her eyes. She finally saw me, not as a resource, but as a person they had pushed to the absolute limit. And she saw that I was never going back. The aftermath was not clean or easy, but it was decisive. Lucy and Mark put their house on the market the following week. The sale was rushed, and they didn't get top dollar, but it was enough to pay off the mortgage entirely, effectively ending the bank's fraud investigation before it could lead to legal charges. The public humiliation they had feared was averted, but their private downfall was absolute. They moved into a small, two-bedroom rental apartment across town. Mark took on a second job, driving for a rideshare service in the evenings. Lucy, stripped of her beautiful backdrop for her influencer lifestyle, had to get a full-time job in retail. The carefully curated illusion of her life had evaporated. My mother's situation was less dramatic but equally transformative. Faced with the reality of her car payment and household bills, she had to make drastic changes. She sold the expensive SUV and bought a modest, used sedan. She learned how to budget, something she hadn't had to do in years. The process was humbling and difficult for her, and our relationship remained strained and distant for a long time. About 3 months after the meeting at the lawyer's office, my mother called me. Her apology, when it came, was not grand or dramatic. It was quiet, hesitant, and for the first time, utterly sincere. "I'm sorry, Amy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I was a bad mother to you. I saw what was happening, and I chose to look away because it was easier. I took your strength and your kindness for granted, and I let your sister treat you horribly. There is no excuse for it. I am so sorry." It was the apology I had waited a lifetime to hear. I didn't offer immediate, easy forgiveness. The wounds were too deep for that, but it was a start. I agreed to meet her for coffee. We began to rebuild, slowly and cautiously. I helped her set up a proper financial plan, not by giving her money, but by giving her my expertise, teaching her how to manage her own affairs. Our new relationship was built on a foundation of honesty and firm boundaries, not on obligation. My relationship with Lucy, however, was irreparably broken. She never truly apologized. In her mind, her suffering was still somehow my fault. We were civil during the few family holidays we both attended at my mother's small apartment, but the warmth was gone forever. I looked at her and saw a stranger, and I mourned the sister I thought I had, the one who had gotten lost somewhere beneath a mountain of entitlement. As for me, the months that followed were a period of quiet reclamation. The health scare that had been looming in the background turned out to be a severe but treatable autoimmune condition, exacerbated by chronic stress. With the primary source of that stress now removed from my life, my health began to improve. The fatigue lifted, the ache in my joints subsided. It was as if my body, like my finances, was finally free. I took the money I was no longer pouring into my family's lives and invested it in my own. I started taking the vacations I had always put off. I reconnected with friends I had neglected. I found a new sense of peace in my quiet, orderly home, a sanctuary that was truly my own. I had lost a family in a way, but I had gained myself. And in the quiet moments, sitting on my porch with a cup of tea, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had made the right choice. The silence that followed the storm was the sound of my own freedom,